Welcome, everyone. This is the Friday, January 28th edition of the NFL Predictive Playbook, and it's presented by Sportsmemo TV for your viewing and knowledgeable, inspirational pleasure. I am your host, John Ryan, and I am pleased to be with my good friend and professional sports bettor, Dr. Chuck. And we are going to break down the two conference championship games, AFC and NFC, and we're going to look for some meaningful and actionable information to pass on to you to help your handicapping needs this weekend, as these games become very tough and you don't want to overbet and you also don't want to make any foolish mistakes. So, Dr. Chuck, welcome to the show. We're going to get right at it here. And the first game is the AFC championship game, in which we have the I'll have to edit this out. I have too many things open. You know what we might do? I just might start the whole thing over.
Yeah. Works for me.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So let me get back to here. And we're at 1 minute and 17 seconds. So we're going to start at 1:30.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone, to the Friday edition, January 28th, of the NFL Predictive Playbook Show, presented by Sportsmemo TV. And I'm your host, and I am psyched for this weekend's card, starting with college basketball and a huge card on Saturday for that particular sport, followed up with two more NFL championship games that are going to be hard to pass the excitement and entertainment of the last four we saw on Saturday and Sunday of the previous week. I'm joined by my good friend and professional sports bettor, Dr. Chuck, who is running hot over at sportsmemo.com. By the way, he ranks number one in several of the categories. I highly recommend him and endorse his work, and you cannot go wrong by getting a subscription from him, especially for this weekend. So we're going to break down the two championship games, Dr. Chuck, and we're going to get started right away. And in the first one, we have the Cincinnati Bengals are taking to the road to take on the Chiefs. And in this matchup of, it's a perennial playoff team in the Chiefs and a newbie in the Cincinnati Bengals. But it's certainly very exciting to see these teams in the house down at Arrowhead Stadium. This game's set to start at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. The one thing I noticed is that the line opened at 7, and it briefly was at 7.5 yesterday, reverted back to 7. And I thought right away, Dr. Chuck, there's no way the books are going to allow 6.5 to come up, because they know they're going to get middled on that 7. They were greeted with very aggressive, sizable bets at 7.5. Pinnacle, as you mentioned before we went on the air, is at 7.5 now. And I think that, since they and Heritage are the leaders of the sports betting world for sports books, that is assurance that this line is not going to go back to, but it will not drop to 6.5, which would be a disaster in terms of risk. There's been 282 football games played this season. Only 19 of them, though, ended with an exact margin of 7 points. So the risk wouldn't be too high, but with all the crazy stuff that happened last weekend, like scoring 25 points in 2.5 minutes type of thing, I'm sure the books don't want to go to 6.5 on this game. But initially, Dr. Chuck, what do you see as any potential opportunity or any struggles you're having with the handicapping? Because these games are the hardest of the year to come up with the correct bet for our clients.
Yeah, and you were discussing right before we went on with some of the exotics and different things that you can get into with the NFL on BetMGM and different sites like that. I utilize DraftKings quite a bit throughout the season just to see where the market is at. And the one thing that just has stuck out to me all week since this line went up, DraftKings, at least before we went on air here, had the total at 54.5, the spread at 7, even money on the Bengals at +7, but the team totals were the Chiefs over under 31.5 and the Bengals over under 22.5. And so, I talk a lot about in my plays and on the shows and stuff like that, begging and where does Vegas need the money? And like you said, with a 6.5, they made their decision that 6.5 is never going to pop. They went the other way. That's going to be based on how the market moved, where the bets are going, and stuff like that. And so it's not erroneous. But why is the Bengals total 22.5 when it seems like it should be 23.5? Why are they so interested in giving us, a little bit of a discount there? And like you said, 7's a lot less common than it used to be. You can go for 2 anytime. You can miss an extra point anytime. Where it just used to be, you had to kick the extra point. You had to kick the extra point from the 2 or 3 yard line, and you just got 7 points every single time. And so the 280 some games in the 19.7s is different than it used to be. But I find it hard to believe that this is a game isn't going to look pretty similar to last week. Joe Burrow isn't probably in Josh Allen's atmosphere yet, and Honey Badger was out and it looks like he might be in. So I guess there's a couple of different things there. But man, do I think that off 34 points, even though it was at home, the Bengals scored in the regular season, I sure would love to get my hands on a 22.5 over on the Bengals, no matter what the Chiefs do.
Yeah, I would lean that way too. And it's interesting to note that to pick the Bengals outright is kind of hard, just initially knowing that Tom Brady's the only quarterback in the history of the Chiefs playoffs recently to defeat them twice. He's the only one. That aside, I then go to the Chiefs and I get very concerned with how they played down the stretch. They had some miraculous comebacks and very fortuitous wins in games that, looking at the film a second and third time, they should have lost. So I really have a hard time believing that they are clicking on all cylinders, and they are coming into this game on a 7-game over streak. So not only does that mean that they're scoring points, their defense is giving up a fair share of points too. And I don't like what I see in that secondary. I think Burrows is vastly talented enough to deliver the ball on those vertical crossing routes as long as he has the time to throw it, which, he went up a much tougher defense last week than he's going to see this week. And then that brings me right around 360 degrees. I'm back to the Bengals. And the Bengals come into this game. They are on a 5-game ATS win streak, and that alone puts them into a very good spot. Actually, it's 6 games in a row they have won against the spread. And teams in the playoffs are 12-6 straight up, 11-7 against the number, and in conference championship week, they're 4-0 against the number. So the other wild card I think too is I've been impressed with their place kicker, McPherson, who this seems not to ever miss. He's an amazing 11 of 13 from beyond 50 yards. So consider the fact that every time the Bengals cross the 50-yard line and get into the Chiefs' territory, it might be an opportunity to kick a 55-yarder. So that is another thing that makes me leery of the Chiefs. But inexperience of the Bengals. I don't know what to do yet with that. And when I run my models later today, they will tell me exactly what to do. So let's move on to the second game, Dr. Chuck. And this one is, the third time these teams have played each other this year. It's at SoFi Stadium, which is called Levi Strauss South, from what I'm beginning to understand. And that, for those that don't know, Levi Strauss South, it would be the Levi Strauss home field for the 49ers back in San Francisco. I also thought it was interesting that Super Bowl 56 is basically LVI in Roman numerals. And for my Wall Street days, Levi Strauss ticker symbol is LEVI, which is that's close enough for me. So for that reason, you can throw the analytics out the window, and then that little betting model, you'll just check the ticker symbol for the Super Bowl Roman numerals and see who comes up, if anyone. But I thought it was pretty eerie that it came up on the 49ers home field and that this new SoFi Stadium is being called Levi Strauss South. What do you think about this matchup? Maybe you have something more serious to bring to the table.
Well, similar to what you're saying, I have a lot of paralysis by analysis stuff. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is just a monster as a dog. I think he's 25-17 ATS as a dog. He's beaten McVay 7 of 10 times straight up. The last 4 were dogs. I mean, we know about the last week of this season, they got them into the playoffs. That one even involved Garoppolo, not just the normal mixtures of running both Mitchell or Samuel or whoever's going to be in the backfield. That you mentioned before we came on air and multiple times, this might be a team of destiny type thing. And thanks to our friends at the Action Network and Data Labs, 22 times a rematch of a divisional rival where one team swept the first two matchups in the regular season have met. And there's that adage, you can't. It's hard to beat a team 3 times. Well, that team that won those first two is 14-8 in the 22 times, and so it's just not true. It's just a thing we say. It just seems like it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but I think you just throw a lot of that out. The struggles with the Rams, they're great on pass rush. Well, that doesn't stop Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel. And as I said, if you're getting 3.5 points. It doesn't matter if they win. So maybe they can't beat the team 3 times in the season. I just think that it's going to be close. And if it comes down to a field goal, like it did last week, against all the odds, if we had said at halftime or even in the third quarter that it was going to be a 3-point game from Matt Gay in that game, it would have been ridiculous. So saying that now, it doesn't, I think it's already heading in that direction. And it's much less likely against this healthier 49ers defense that knows the team even better than the Bucs do, that they can stop them, even though Stafford has looked a lot better than he was looking at the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And for live betting, which everybody knows I'd love to do, and I was fortunate enough to get the Bucs at plus 12.5, thinking that there is no way that Brady's going to lose by double digits. That worked out. I think on both sides of the coin of this game, and you did it so well with your breakdown, that this is going to be a battle, and it could be a high scoring battle, it could be a low scoring battle, but there will be flows, and there will be situations where both the Rams and the 49ers could score twice without an answer from the opponent. So what I'm saying here is that I kind of have a gut feeling here, and it applies to people who like the Rams. If you like the Rams, listen to what I have to say. They are 3.5 favorites at home. Let's say that the 49ers score a touchdown first. You're suddenly going to get pick available to you in the live bet. So with all the volatility of the scoring in these games that we've seen this whole entire playoffs and basically the whole regular season, it stands to reason, at least for me, bet 50% of your normal bet size pre-flop and then save that ammunition for in-game. And you might be able to get pick for the Rams. You might even be able to get plus 3.5. I doubt whether you'll be able to get double digits on both sides live in-game, but it is possible, especially with that first game between the Chiefs and the Bengals. So I really encourage people to give that a shot. And it's going to feel weird if you've never done it, because if it's 10-0 49ers, you're going to feel like you're taking the rest of your 50% bet and just throwing it into the wind. But rest assured, you're not. A lot of times when you do these bets, it's going to feel like the worst possible thing you're doing. And that actually is a good thing, Dr. Chuck. When you feel like that, when I do it and I think, what am I doing? That is usually a good result.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And it goes to what you're saying is that these games are close. It's just been a thing. And it's almost a commissioner thing. And I talk about this a lot, but like with Tagliabue, et cetera, and it's just, Goodell has created parity on purpose. I don't think people believe that maybe, but I think it's true. It's on purpose. This didn't used to be.
Yeah.
Think about it. The 4 games,
it is.
We're talking about how great these 4 games were. The one that went to overtime was the biggest margin. Like, that's what we're talking about from last weekend. 3 games didn't go to overtime, and they were all closer than the overtime game on the scoreboard, and that's what we're dealing with in this game. So it's just really unbelievable that, and I'm not saying it's conspiracy theorists or anything like that, but I mean, we're talking about these Rams were up. The game was over in a time. It's a timed football game. It's over. You just don't give Brady the ball back. It's if Cooper Kupp just falls down, if Cam Akers just falls down, this isn't even a close game. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason. And so when you are expecting it to be something close, or if you and I would probably make this spread to be even closer, which is why we're both leaning or on the Niners, is because I don't think the Rams should be laying home field advantage. And you brought that up in the opening.
Yep.
They're laying full home field advantage, and you can get a hook on this field goal. And I just think it's insanely valuable.
I agree. Let's go through some of the Bet MGM offerings that are promotions. They're paying better odds than you would normally get if you did it yourself and created these parlays. So we had like 4 or 5 of them here. We'll do it in rapid fashion, Dr. Chuck. The first one is Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes each throw for 300 or more yards, and the teams combined for 55 or more points. That's paying plus 350 or 3.5 to 1. If you bet $10 on it and that happens, you'll win 35. What do you think about that one?
Oh, absolutely. I want to know the exact status of Honey Badger. I do think that is important. I think Josh Allen might have carved them up either way because, he was looking at Gabriel Davis, and that is not a primary target. And that's one thing that the Bengals have as well is, they've made a lot of 3 big receivers, and any of them could take over the game at any time. And so yep. I think, believe it or not, and based on the spread, you might need Patrick Mahomes to pull up that end of the bargain. But I think both 300 yards I think the 55 points is a pretty good bet too. Yeah. So.
Number 2, Joe Burrow to throw for 300 or more yards, Jamar Chase to record 85 or more receiving yards, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire to rush for 40 or more yards. If all 3 of those athletes accomplish those feats, it pays plus 450. So now a $10 pizza bet becomes $45 in potential profit. I'm actually not on that one, Dr. Chai. I don't like that one because I know just inherently from experience, one of those 3 is not going to happen. It's probably not the first one, but Jamar Chase could end up with 80 yards and you lose.
Yeah.
So exactly. I'm staying away from that one.
And I would probably stay away from that one as well, but I like those kind of combinations. If you can get like a Byron Pringle and something like that, I really think that, he's an underrated prop look this weekend. You can get him in there. But we mentioned Darrell Williams went from full participant to limited participant today. And so he might, the backfield might be reduced to just CEH and McKinnon. So that's going to help you get 40 rush yards there. But, and what's interesting, just as a quick aside, the people that have the legal sports betting in their states that have the apps and the DraftKings, the live betting is involved with the player props too. It's insane. Like let's say you're big on Kelsey. Mahomes doesn't look towards Kelsey the whole first quarter. Well, suddenly he's dropped from 82.5 to 62.5. It's insane. And so you got to watch for that stuff too, because it's a timed game. The books have to reduce their liability, and so they can't constantly leave it where it was as time elapses and as the Bengals are slow. Only one team used more of each play clock this season than the Bengals on offense. And so they have the ability to potentially keep the ball away from the Chiefs, who probably won't have the same pass rush. And so you can get so much value. Tyreek Hill could bust any play. And so he could have 4 targets, no catches at halftime. And he might have dropped his receiving yards in half, which he did. Sure. He did in the last 2 minutes of the last game. So, it's worth looking at live betting sports or player props as well, which is just, so much value as opposed to pre-pop.
The last one for the show here is Matthew Stafford and Jimmy Garoppolo each throw for 2 or more touchdowns, and Deebo Samuel to rush for 50 or more yards. That is the highest odds of these specials at BetMGM. It's plus 525, which means $52.50 for that $10 pizza bet. I hate this one. I wouldn't bet this with Tony Finn's money. Not at all. How about you, Dr. Chuck?
No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere near Deebo. I'm bullish on the Niners, and I'm bullish on Kyle Shanahan. But I mean, not enough time has passed. It's interesting that both these games were just played. And I just don't think, Deebo dominated with those different looks in that game, as well as, Shanahan just kind of has their number as far as that goes. And I think if McVay and his coaching staff know one thing, they know they just have to, they have to stop the Deebo Samuel, constant
express.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think Kyle Shanahan's already going to be ahead of that game, and I think that it's a who's going to outsmart who, and I think Shanahan's going to already come in with a game plan of more Elijah Mitchell, more Kittle, and a little bit less Deebo Samuel, at least out of the backfield.
I agree, and I'm going to leave the viewers of the show with one simple betting system here. It has to do with the under, betting the under in the San Francisco LA Rams game. And you're going to bet under with road teams that are the number 6 seed in the playoffs, which is what the 49ers are. Believe it or not, 26, 5, and 1 last 10 seasons. That's 83% winners betting the under. So I'll leave you with that food of thought. And Dr. Chuck brings us to the end of our show. I appreciate your time as always, and I appreciate the time spent by our viewers. Make sure you subscribe to the Sportsmemo TV YouTube channel if you already have not, and ring that bell because then you'll get notified for every single show we do in every single sport, basically 360 days out of the year. So thanks again for watching, and always remember, bet with your head and never over it, and may all the wins be yours.